Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to our new City Hall. We're very proud and hope you guys are enjoying it. Welcome to the April 17th, 2017 work session. It's our regularly scheduled work session. Tonight we have 11 items on the agenda, and public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you're required to fill out a public comment card and turn it into the city clerk. Public comment will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Public comment will be heard at the beginning of the item, and once the item is called, no other public cards will be accepted. So, Sudi, do we have any public comment?
We do not, sir.
Okay. Well, then, if you will please sound the first item.
Our first item this evening is a proclamation recognizing Patriots' Day. This is being presented by Councilmember Bill Lusk.
Usually we don't have a salute to the flag. Do we want to do that?
We can. Yeah. If you guys want to do it.
Colonel Thurman, would you have the color guard come forward and we'll do the pledge to the flag, please?
Okay. To the front. Ready? Halt. To the right, face.
All stand.
Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To the right, to the left, face. To the front, Mike.
If you would, you'd probably want to stand out front and remain up front, please.
Oh, you want us to map? Yeah. Ready, halt. Form, give, reform by in front of him by this. Everyone call.
Lecture.
Very technical.
You want us in front, back, or rear?
In the rear, George.
Yeah.
Paul.
Okay. Try to catch it.
You need the exercise. Okay, we'll be seated.
All right. Shannon, let's do the presentation first and then. Okay.
By the rude bridge that arched the spring flood, their flag 2 Aprils breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmer stood and fired the shot heard round the world. We're here tonight to commemorate Patriots' Day and the battle that started our American Revolution for Independence. And I shall read this proclamation, then afterwards we'll have members of Patriots of Liberty chapter and Martha Stewart Bullock chapter DAR come up front also to receive this proclamation. It's a proclamation, Patriots' Day. Whereas April 12th, 1775 is a momentous date in the founding of our nation, once celebrated with other patriotic holidays. And whereas in the early hours of that day, Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Dr. Samuel Prescott raced through the Massachusetts countryside to warn fellow citizens that British troops were coming to arrest their leaders and seize their stores of ammunition. And whereas, answering this alarm, patriots took up arms, congregated on the village green in Lexington, and during a confrontation with the British troops, several patriots were killed, thus marking the beginning of the War for American Independence. And whereas on that same day, determined patriots lay in wait for the advancing British at Concord's North Bridge, and during the intense fighting, they repulsed the British, who then began their retreat to Boston, with the patriots harassing them all the way. And whereas news of the shot heard round the world galvanized public opinion in favor of the American Revolution, including reluctant Georgians, and whereas it is appropriate that we recognize the importance of this day in our history and remember the sacrifices endured by many patriots during the years of struggle for American independence. Whereas Milton County honored John Milton, a Georgia Continental officer whom the British captured at Fort McIntosh in 1777 and imprisoned at St. Augustine. During the British capture of Savannah in 1778, Milton saved Georgia's public records by taking them to the Carolinas and later to Maryland. He returned the records following the reestablishment of Georgia's government in 1782. Milton County became part of Fulton County in 1931. Whereas the city of Milton is named for John Milton and is within the county once named for him, now therefore the city of Milton proclaims the 17th day of April as Patriots' Day and encourages our citizens to honor the many patriots for whom Georgia counties and towns are named, and pay tribute to all the patriots of the American Revolution, given under his hand and the seal of the city of Milton, Georgia, on this 17th day of April, 2017. And at this time, I'd like to recognize not only the color guard, Colonel George Thurman, Bob Sapp, Rick Reese, and Paul Prescott, but our Children of the American Revolution Society, Devin Baker, who's with us tonight also. And members of the Martha Stewart Bullock chapter, Catherine Jimenez, the Regent, Carol Bryant, Constitution Week Chairman, Linda Reese, Kathy Helming, Tamara Baker, who is president of Martha Stewart Bullock Children of the American Revolution Society, and patriots of the Liberty chapter, DAR, Alicia King, Susan Yatsenko, Sue Udell, and Pauline McKinney. So at this time, council will come down and will present these proclamations to both the SAR and DAR. Sir.
Just a little bit. Good. Okay, well, we can swing around the back. Swing around this way just a little bit. I saved my check running for October.
We should.
You what? Nothing.
All right, Sudi, do we have any public comment on item number 2?
We do not, sir.
All right, if you'll please call that item.
This item is discussion of draft communication survey. Ms. Shannon Ferguson.
Mayor, members of the council, good evening. I think it's up. Let's see. Oh, there it is. I just wanted to introduce the survey, offer opportunities for you to provide feedback, suggestions. I know that you all work closely with your constituents, so there may be things that you're aware of that I may not be aware of that would be good to include, or there may be things that we can clarify for you. But I wanted to sort of go through the communication survey. And in general, the goals that we have obviously are to gain insight in what residents want to hear from us, to focus on things that we may be doing well now and ways that we can improve. It will be distributed primarily through a SurveyMonkey link driven online with online responses, but I intend to do a traditional press release. In other communities that I've done community surveys, I think it's important to include a print option. So I'll be exploring an option for printing the survey and dropping it off or mailing it in the Milton Herald, as well as social media. So all of the distribution channels were the traditional digital, online, through the website, but primarily going through SurveyMonkey. We'll focus on Milton residents. I know we have a full agenda, so I'll go through these. They're pretty self-explanatory, but we'll focus on Milton residents. We're going to look at qualifying zip code. That helps us figure out maybe if there are certain types of messaging that we want to cater or deliver to certain zip codes. That helps us in terms of how we filter the data that we collect from the other questions throughout the survey. We'll talk a little bit about currently use, so we want to be open-ended so that I can sort of brainstorm and gather information from residents about how they're actually getting information from us currently. I know how I think they're getting the information, but I want them to tell me, so that's why it's open-ended. And we'll also have statements that allow residents to talk about sort of feelings in terms of what they're getting and what that really means to them, if they feel like they're informed or if they need more information. So that sort of helps gauge and give us range of what we're doing now and maybe areas that we need to improve on. We'll ask them specifically about how they would prefer to get information. Again, I want that to be open-ended because I want it to be, I don't want to guide their answers. I want them to give me the responses. And then also, we have the Connect Milton app, which Carter and I have talked a little bit about possibly expanding and enhancing. That Connect Milton app right now, you know, is for reporting code enforcement as well as other problems and suggestions specific to code violations and things like that. Is there a way for us to push messaging maybe related to road closure updates, other city updates via that Connect Milton app as a way to engage them through their phone, which is primarily where most people are getting their information at this point. 8 is specifically talking about Code Red, and that's obviously our emergency management notification system, and it's driven by a resident, signing up. They raise their hand, fill out the information, their address, how they tell us specifically how they want to receive that information, but those are not for general city updates. They're reserved exclusively for emergency. So the idea here with this question would be to educate them about the existence of Code Red and maybe gathering that information, and if they say no and they've responded no, we have an opportunity then to reach out to that group of individuals who've responded to share the Code Red information with them, and that way they have an opportunity. If they haven't heard about the program previously, they have an opportunity to sign up. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about social media, so we want to know if they're using social media, and if they are, what are their top three, an app or a channel or a platform that we're not on that we need to be on. Because if I get overwhelming responses that tell me a specific platform of what they're using, then maybe we need to be there, because it's a matter of sprinkling the city's message in multiple places. And then also, number 10 gives me an opportunity to educate the resident about what platforms we actually are on, while at the same time educating them. We have it at the bottom of our Facebook page, we have it at the bottom of our website, we have it on all of our newsletters, but sometimes that's just noise, and we don't, as readers, we don't always pay attention. So it's a way to engage them and educate them at the same time. And then we'll look at the frequency in which they want to receive information, the types of information. So we want them, again, to tell us open-ended what is it that they want to hear. It's easy for me to figure out best practice. I know what that is. I know what the channels and the platforms are for distribution, but what do our residents want? How do they want it from us? And then we also have a question about terms of taxpayer using city revenue to pay paid marketing for publications, how they feel like that, to gauge their interest. Is that something they're comfortable with? But again, letting the communication strategies and the taxes that we use be driven by the residents. And then obviously, we have standard demographic information that we'll request. Gender and age, obviously, helping us gauge the responses and being able to do some querying and some categorizing of the responses we do receive. And then finally, keeping it short. Most of the community surveys that I've done, it's best to keep it anywhere from 10 to 16, 17. If you get upwards of 20, people check out. You want it to be short, brief, and enough to give them the information, but also not to overwhelm them. And then the last question, my intent here is to collect information not just about the communication strategies, but what is the city doing, additional feedback. What is the city doing, department? What would you like to see? What are we doing well? But leaving it completely open-ended so that the resident has an opportunity to convey that and communicate that message to us. We may have missed opportunities. We may find that there are things that we're doing that we need to do more of. So that will be sort of the intent of that final question. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Matt?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess the only thing from a suggestion perspective is on questions 4, 6, 9, and 11, you have fill in the blanks. Does SurveyMonkey, I guess that's what you're going to use, is SurveyMonkey,
Yes.
right? So are they going to allow you to put some options in there and then maybe have an other at the end that they can fill in the blanks?
There is logic that
Okay.
we'll use and employ, and we are focused on Milton residents, so those first two questions will specifically, if you answer no to begin with, that obviously will help us filter resident versus non-resident, and the zip helps me further filter based on resident, non-resident. But yes, you do have the ability. We have a paid subscription, so it allows a little bit more functionality than a free version.
Okay.
Bill?
Now, are you going to send these out to every household or just a sampling?
I have varying opinions about a sample. I'm much more in favor of sending it out to everyone and giving everyone the opportunity rather than doing a random sample. The question there then becomes, how do you reach everyone? I am exploring budget to see if there's a way for me to send a postcard to be able to reach all of those. So right now we have the database of newsletter recipients that will go to. We'll publish it obviously through a press release and hope that the Milton Herald picks it up. If we have a print version, that would drive people and residents that way. We want to explore social sharing through a lot of our partners, so strategic partners, whether it's schools, PTAs, church and civic groups, but of a way to disseminate and to sort of spread the reach. But my intent is to reach every household or as many households as possible rather than taking a random sample.
Good plan.
Anybody else? That was going to be my question, because there are a small, percentage of people that aren't maybe active online or this or that. So, but you kind of answered that too. Maybe the Herald will pick it up, or I don't know if we can do it.
I have an interest too, and I've talked a little bit about, Courtney Spriggs and I've talked a little bit about too, reaching out to doing some senior surveys through the senior centers, through the assisted living. So we'll reach all of our residents, not just the ones who may be engaged through traditional, digital, or social.
Right. And, if you want to offer that up, I'll be glad to hand deliver
That's
to
right.
folks that need one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll take you on that.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay?
One last thing, or is it going to be available in a print version on the 29th for anyone who comes to the event? Pick it up?
That is hope,
Okay.
that I have it finalized, ready to go, but the idea would be to have it available in print form at special events. I failed to, thank you for bringing that up, to have it available in print form at special events, maybe to have some iPads there that people could actually do while they're an
okay.
event, whether it's Jubilee or Crabapple Fest, but that's a little bit further on, but use the points. But to engage them at events, to be able to either do print or to do a digital survey while they're there on the spot. Thanks.
Okay, Beth? Thanks. All right, Sudie, we'll move on to item number 3. Do we have any public?
We do not, sir.
Okay.
This item is discussion of an ordinance of the City of Milton, Georgia, to amend Chapter 4 alcoholic beverages of the Code of the City of Milton, Georgia, comprehensive amendments. Ms. Sarah Ladart.
Oh, there it goes, okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Past several months, I've been working with Bernadette and Captain McCarty on looking through our current alcohol ordinance and talking with current and potential businesses as well as leasing agents and the Georgia Restaurant Association with one of their attorneys, as well as our own city attorneys, on what some additions we could make to our alcohol ordinances to make them a little bit more business friendly, a little bit more user friendly, while still obviously operating within the confines of the law. So we're going to go over a few things. The first ones are new licenses that we would like to propose for you to consider. The others are changes or revisions to current ordinances that are already in Chapter 4. So the first is a bring your own beverage license, a BYOB license. So this would apply to any business that's open that allow a patron to bring in their own beer or wine. It's limited to beer and wine, and on all of you across the time constraints are consistent, that it's Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Sunday from 12:30 to 9 p.m. That's the first one, the BYOB license. The second one would be an incidental license. This comes from some of our salons throughout my tenure here complaining that they can go to other municipalities and have a glass of wine with their nails done, or they get salon services, and we don't allow that. So that's the intent behind this one. So it's an establishment that doesn't sell food, that cannot charge for the alcohol, the time constraints are the same, and we limit the amount that they're allowed to serve to each patron in a day. And the kind of catch-all, so to protect us from people taking advantage, this was suggested by the Georgia Restaurant Association, that you make it that the alcohol expense cannot be more than 2% of the total overhead. So if we see somebody come in and get an alcohol or the incidental license, and suddenly they're hosting shindigs, we can go in and at that time request to audit their books, and if they're exceeding this 2% of overhead, we can revoke the incidental license. The last one is a limited tap license. So this would be for a mercantile perhaps wants to have a few taps, so when somebody comes in to shop, maybe they'll stick around and have a beer and continue shopping. So with this one, they do not have food. It's limited to 4 taps, and the part of this that I like is that the brewery has to be within 50 aerial miles of the establishment. We're encouraging people to use the Jekyll breweries, the Sweetwaters, the local brews, so it's a little economic development in there. Again, limiting the time, limiting the amount that can be consumed in a day. And of course, the establishment would have to gain approval from the fire marshal and building officials in accordance with the applicable codes to make sure that they are staying a mercantile and not becoming an assembly. So the next ones we're going to talk about are changes to existing sections of Chapter 4. The first one that we know going through this was growler sample size. So in the current ordinance, the sample sizes for if you're sampling growlers versus wine, it's different. So I just made them uniform. So it's the same if you're sampling a beer or wine, it's the same. The next one we looked at was wine tastings. Right now, you can only have wine tastings if you only sell wine. If you also sell beer, you're not allowed to do wine tastings. So I'm adding that in, that you can have wine tastings if you also sell beer. Right now, we also limit it to, you can do wine tasting once a week for 2 hours. So that means that if I'm a wine merchant and customer A comes in on Tuesday and wants to sample a couple bottles of wine before they purchase them, that uses up wine tastings for the entire week. So if somebody else come in on Wednesday who would like to sample wine, I legally cannot give them a sample of wine. So instead, we remove the limitations on the number of times per week, but keep the limit on the amount served to each patron when they come in. Also, right now, we do not allow wine tastings on open areas, sidewalks, patios. To make it pursuant to Milton Section 4-238 open area and patio sales regulations, if you do a written application and it's approved through the city, we would like to allow wine samplings in open sidewalks, patios, things like that. And again, we have that same time constraint, the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and 12:30 to 9 p.m. The next one is the ability to discount. Right now, we do not offer that. It says we prohibit it. We would like to limit that activity by limiting it to 50% off regular priced and making that hours 4:30 to 7:30 Monday through Sunday. The next is pouring permits. At the request of Captain McCarty, he wants those applications to just go straight through the police department. Right now, they go to the city manager or his or her designee, which usually ends up being the police department anyways. So just streamline it, send it straight to the police department. He wants to make fingerprinting a part of the background investigation. And this one is, the last thing on here is helpful for those getting the permits. Right now, if you work at 2 separate establishments in Milton, you actually have to have a pouring permit to work at Restaurant A and Restaurant B. This annual permit would allow you to serve at any restaurant in Milton using the same pouring permit. Right now, brown bagging permit, we want to more clearly state what we mean by that. So just changing that to say that an unfinished bottle of wine that has been purchased at the establishment be recorked by a licensee or their permitted employee to remove from the premises. That's how we would like the brown bagging permit to read. And then right now it has to be sealed by the licensee, and it's not really reasonable to expect the holder of the license to be at the establishment at all times when a bottle of wine may want to be resealed. So we would like to change that to be the licensee or another permitted employee. And then the last one is alcohol consumption on City Hall premises. Right now we have that alcohol can be consumed on city-owned properties except City Hall, a fire station, or a public safety facility. And being that we would like people to use our wonderful community hub for events, they would still have to apply for a permit to be able to have alcohol at City Hall, but kind of take away that complete prohibition and allow it to be judged on a time-per-time permitting basis. Oh, and our fee structure, Bernadette, that's her.
Good evening. Once you all review all the options that Sarah has put forth, Finance will go through, of course, an update Appendix A according to a fee structure that matches what we currently offer. In addition to that, we also like to look at trying to change the fee structure for prorated licenses. Currently, if you come in anytime after June 30, you pay half the year. We're looking at trying to do a month basis for the remaining months after June 30. So then no one's kind of paying for a whole year, but or only open maybe in November. Additionally, we kind of looked at a few other things within the license, or within the alcohol beverage license ordinance. And currently, special event facilities are only allowed in rural or agricultural event facilities that are defined in the zoning code. And we would like to extend that also to the assembly hall definition that is also obtained within the zoning code. And lastly, we need to update just a few more issues according to state law, and that's our interest. The State House Bill 960 was updated, so it's no longer 1% per month for late excise taxes. It's actually now a larger definition of it, which basically comes down to the point that it is the Federal Reserve rate as of January 1 plus 3% divided over 12 months.
Okay.
Which is less than 1%.
Any questions? Donna, I have a question on and it makes sense to me, the prorating the fees after, 6 months or middle of the year or whatever, but so which is, I think, fair to the businesses, but will that impact our overall budget? Do we have many people that, come in November, get a,
It happens from time to time, and a lot of the other surrounding jurisdictions do this, so we thought would be more in line with kind of being as business-friendly as some of the other jurisdictions. It's not a large number at any given time, though.
The amount should be de minimis.
Yeah, along the same lines, I mean, not that it happens often, but it's sort of logical. Why don't we just prorate it by month, starting in January? Because otherwise we're incenting people to wait until June to go ahead and apply.
We are more than welcome to that suggestion. We had just went along with what was currently going on in the other jurisdictions, but more than welcome to that.
This is entirely crafted to be able to improve economic development. And one of the other things that I had asked them to make sure they incorporated into all these changes is revocability, in case water finds a way through this somehow and someone tries to do something that was never intended. Each of these changes incorporates with it the ability to revoke that right to be able to do those, to conduct themselves in this manner.
yes, Matt?
Just a quick question on this. Obviously, if we have some changes, I know we're looking at this now, but we might be opening this up to just more. So how would that affect our staff and enforcement? I guess is the question. Are they just new training? Do we need more employees on that? Are we expecting or anticipating anything? Just curious about your thoughts on our overhead as far as how we manage this process.
You, in regards to implementing
Open it up. Once we open it up, how much do we think we're just going to grow? How much do we have to, how are we going to go into an establishment and check to make sure that we only had the minimum allowed or maximum allowed as far as servings goes? I'm just thinking about everything you put in there.
So
Yeah.
as far as, limiting the amount that can be consumed on a daily basis, that's one of the catch safes that we put in there. So we won't, people won't be in there. We won't have someone with a little clicker saying, all right, you've had your 3 drinks, you're done. But if all of a sudden you notice an uptick in disturbances, things like that happening, we can go in and obviously say that this gentleman had more than 2 glasses of wine. He had more than his 8 ounces. He had more than whatever. And those are the kind of the safes that we put in there to, if we start noticing more occurrences.
By and large, we're depending upon voluntary compliance with these regulations. And as we start to see aberrations from that, we could send in certain levels of enforcement to make sure that they either comply or we revoke.
Sure.
I think also part of the, question too, obviously if you have more businesses applying, it's going to even administrative time. It may take some time, some more effort, employee time. So I guess we just have to monitor that. The flip side, it's obviously, if it's been business friendly, then it's, ultimate revenue. So it should be beneficial both ways. Bill?
On one of the issues, I think it was salons or businesses don't normally serve alcohol, but they were being entitled to do that. And you mentioned that it couldn't exceed 2% of their overhead. How did you come up with overhead? How do you need financials, I guess, to determine what their overhead was? Where did that come from?
So that wording came from the Georgia Restaurant Association. Their attorney suggested that calculation. So it's what she does. I took her word for it.
Well, I guess you have to have some basis for sure.
Right. Well, and that's another one. So if we see people starting to host parties or we see things happening, at that point we could go in and request, okay, we need to see your receipts. We need to see your, income statement from last year. And if that exceeds the 2%, we're able to revoke that license.
Well, you're talking about revenues then, not necessarily overhead.
So we can work on the wording there, and that's what we've gone through. And we currently are looking towards in our business license collecting returns, so we can base it off of that in the future, off the bottom line for gross receipts.
Anybody else? Thank you.
If there's any changes, you can contact Sarah or I can put them through before we get everything together for you next time.
Okay. City, do we have any public comment on this next item?
We do. We have 2, sir. The first one comes from Scott Reese.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm Scott Reese with Brumbelow Reese and Associates, doing business at 13685 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia, 30004. This is in response to the anticipated changes in the preliminary plat and concept plan review. In the past, we had a public meeting advertised by the city, organized by staff, after the review of either concept plan or preliminary plat, however you want to say it, and we reviewed the plat. So now it is my understanding that it's going to go before Planning Commission, and my main concern is the process and effect of a denial from Planning Commission. So in the process, you're going to have a licensed professional by the state that's going to develop a plan. That plan should be in compliance with the rules and regulations that dictate development and subdivisions within the city of Milton. It's my understanding that we're spending untold thousands of dollars developing a new UDC that should streamline the process, delete any ambiguities. We should have a document that this licensed professional will have that will hopefully create a product that will stand review. So after he develops this plan that, you know, a property owner or citizen of the city of Milton wants to sell his property, the licensed professional develops the plan, submits it to your professional staff. They review it. They approve it or deny it based on its the characteristics and the fact that it met all of your written codes in the new UDC. So let's go through that process. The licensed professional has developed it. Your professional staff has reviewed it. Then it goes to, my understanding, the Planning Commission, and they have the ability to approve it or deny it. My concern is, what are the ground rules for denial? Is this an objective or is it a subjective denial? I would hope that you're going to put in language that says the denial must be based upon a discrepancy from the DC that cites chapter and verse of where the discrepancy is. I would hope it's not some aesthetics or just the fact of, you know, well, maybe we can delete a lot. You must understand also that this plat process that we go through, very complex. One minor change affects every other lot in the subdivision. If you move one line, your drainage characteristics, your soils for your septic, your roads, everything changes. It's a blocking jigsaw puzzle that one change dictates. So what it does for me is it destroys my ability to provide a professional proposal or a time frame to a citizen that wishes to sell or develop their property. So, in closing, I would hope that you would put in language that would dictate the approval or denial process, and that if it is denied, that there must be a legitimate reason how it differs from written ordinances. Hopefully the UDC will be in effect very soon, the new one, so you'll have a unified development code and be streamlined. So that is my concern, and I hope you will address that. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Sudie, do we have any more public comment?
The last one comes from Richard Warnick.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. I'm speaking to the same item as
Excuse
Scott.
me, Mr. Warner, would you just, for the record, mind name
yes.
and address?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Richard Warnick, I'm in 3366 Barberton Lane in Alpharetta. Speaking as a developer as opposed to an engineer, time is money, and a lot of these projects are large projects. If something would happen, even a deferral, I mean, Scott posed denial, but even a deferral of 30 days, whatever it might be that the planning committee would have discretion to do, would obviously cost a lot of money to the person coming before council trying or coming before the city trying to develop a piece of property that's already in entitled to the zoning. We're not talking about a zoning case. We're just talking about getting information out to the public that y'all decide that they need to have. And even though we go through the process, we want it to be, just a process, not a forum for which the denials and referrals and all sorts of stuff could take place. I think the ultimate purpose is just to be informative and also get input, perhaps to make it better or however the input could come, but it should not be a or denial process. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Sue, do we have any more comment?
That's all, sir.
You would just state the item? for the
This
record?
item is discussion of revisions to plat process Chapter 50 subdivisions. Ms. Kathy Field.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The purpose of this presentation is to review with you a new subdivision review process. I first want to start by way of background with the existing process, and also a footnote that before this existing process was in place, which has been tweaked over the last year, previous to this existing process, it was the review process was very administratively heavy, in that all approvals were done through my office, and then the plats then went onto the consent agenda of the City Council. There was a lot of concern voiced by many residents that the residents really did not know when these subdivisions were coming through, and that they had no knowledge of them. So what we tried to do was to put in a public notification process and a public meeting process, as well as structure the review of the subdivision plats by the time that they got to the City Council into either consent if they were minor, or on the regular agenda if they were major. And that's what I'm going to show, I'm going to reflect here in this current plan approval process. And I'm going to refer to this as Plan A, and through the presentation. So this is Plan A. Right now, an applicant submits a preliminary plat. Staff reviews the preliminary plat and makes comments. Then the staff holds a public informational meeting. This is a meeting that we publicly advertise. We notify residents. We use essentially the same public notification process as we do for rezonings. Then subsequent to the public information meeting, an LDP is issued and development is under construction. Then the applicant would then submit a final plat or an as-built. That's reviewed by staff, and the final, and then the plat meets the zoning and subdivision regulations. If it does, it's approved by me as the Director of Community Development. At that point, it then is put on the council agenda. If it's a minor, it goes on consent. If it's a major, it goes on under new business. Subsequent to that, upon approval by the City Council, the signed plat is returned to the applicant, and the applicant records the plat at the Fulton County Superior Court, and the applicant returns 29 copies. So that is the current process that we're underway with. That is Plan A. We are proposing a Plan B, and the Plan B, in essence, hopes to achieve greater transparency, greater notification, greater opportunity by the community to interact in terms of knowledge on the plat as it's being reviewed, and also the ability to make comments. So having said that, the proposed process, which I'm going to refer to as Plan B, just a few definitions. A preliminary plat review is those that are in 3-lot subdivisions. Subdivisions that have more than 3 lots. The final plat review would be the as-built plat of more than 3 lots for a subdivision. And that's what we used to refer to as a major, okay? Then we still have the minor plat review, and really has not changed much in that. We have less than 3 lots. The minor changes such as address, lot lines, and combination of 2 lots are essentially what we usually deal with under minor plats. So here would be the new process that we're proposing. For the preliminary plat review process, the community development staff would review the application for completeness, and once it's complete, the preliminary plat is forwarded to me as the community development director. I review and approve it, and then I forward that to the Planning Commission for consideration. The Planning Commission will hold public hearing and approve or deny this preliminary plat. And again, all the notification that we used for rezonings would be in place, would be the same type of notification to the public for this meeting. If the preliminary is denied by the Planning Commission, the subdivider may submit an application of appeal to the mayor and city council. So that is the preliminary plat process. Then the final plat review process is, and again, after the preliminary plat is finished and reviewed and approved, then the developer could get his land disturbance permit and put in his improvements. And then he would come back with his asphalt, and we would review the application for completeness. And once complete, I would certify the plat as being in compliance with city codes. Then the plat is then forwarded to the mayor and city council for approval. Item placed on the mayor and city council agenda, the new business, and upon approval by the city council, city records, we would plat at the city courthouse. I'm sorry, city courts platted courthouse, sorry. Appeal. If final plat is denied, subdivider may submit an application of appeal to the Superior Court. So that would be the new process for major. I still use that word because I think we all identify with it, but for a major plat, anything over 3 lots, that would be the process we would use for the preliminary and then the final. And then minor plat review process, the community development staff will review the application for completeness. Once complete, the community development director reviews the minor plat and approves unless it's inconsistent with city codes. Then the minor plat is then forwarded to the mayor and city council for confirmation. Appeal. If the minor plat is denied by the community development director, subdivider may submit an application of appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then once certified, items placed on the mayor and city council consent agenda. Upon confirmation by city council, city records at county courthouse. Appeal. Minor plat denied, subdivider may submit an application of appeal to the Superior Court. So that it's a 2-part process. The first part is an administrative approval by me. That can be appealed to the BZA. Is that right? To BZA. And then it then goes on to the city council on their consent agenda. If it's denied, that can be denied, appeal to the Superior Court. So that is the revised process that we are referring to as Plan B.
Anybody have any questions? I'd like to just, the original, and I know there's probably concerns based on some public comment, but also the original intent, and again, I want to make sure that there's still, the applicants are following our codes and our zoning ordinances, so that it shouldn't really necessarily, obviously it will be a little bit more work and a little more time consuming and effort, but it shouldn't be adding new rules, correct? It should be, per our codes.
That is correct.
And the reason I say that, obviously it will be a little bit more work both from the city and applicants, but the intent was, because a lot of things are being developed that just fit under the ordinances and rules that the council doesn't come before council and the public. So, the real intent of this was to have more transparency so that everybody is aware of things coming up. They can weigh in. They can look at it. It could be a positive thing. The planning commission could have some ideas that the developers may add in there that would be a positive perk to it. But I guess, so I just want to make sure that it's not necessarily a huge hurdle for development. It's just a little bit more transparent process so that folks have more time to digest it, weigh in, and,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that was the intent.
okay. Joe?
So in terms of the problems that we were trying to fix by updating Plan A to be Plan B, I think one of the things that you said is there were lots of steps involved. We were trying to streamline that a little bit. Like Joe just mentioned, we're not actually impacting any codes related to what a subdivision can be or not be, that kind of stuff. So this is just an approval process that we're focused on.
That is correct, because my review really is review that responds to making sure that they are meeting all of our regulations.
So to get maybe back to Joe's question a little more specific, what steps did we introduce, or what options did we introduce in Plan B that didn't exist in Plan A?
The review approval by the Planning Commission.
So why did we add that in? What was the guiding idea that led us to say, we need to put this in there? Because obviously if we're taking stuff out and trying to streamline something, you usually don't want to add stuff back in.
Right. Well, as it currently exists under the Plan A version, we just have a public information meeting. And that's all done and handled administratively by staff. The thought was to, after staff has reviewed for code of compliance, we would then send it over to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission would hold a public hearing, and they would hear testimony, and they would hear from the developer, and they would receive comments and questions from the public, and they would have the ability to say A or nay. And we do have some specific criteria which they have to use to judge that.
What's the Planning Commission's role in Plan A?
None.
Okay, so we are making a somewhat material change in terms of what the process looks like.
That is correct.
Because we're introducing control of the commission that it doesn't exist today.
That is correct.
Now, is the intent, though, not necessarily control, but more education and transparency and discussion?
Yes,
more
it's
public
the
discussion?
ability to make the community aware of this proposed subdivision, to allow them to ask questions through the Planning Commission to the developer, to comment and give their concerns, and to allow the Planning Commission to have the opportunity to hear those comments and concerns from the public, should there be any, and then to weigh in and to query the developer, and then to ultimately make a decision.
I guess and I don't know if you're going this way, Joe, but concern, I could also see is if it meets the code and the law, but then it goes through a process and, the commission could just say, we don't like this, so, you're going to defer it or deny it. And so, what would happen in that circumstance? We need to make sure it's a legitimate reason that they would deny it.
That is correct, and it is appealable to this body, to the council.
Right. I guess my point was going to be, I used the term control because a group that normally wouldn't have weighed in on the decision is all of a sudden weighing in, and they can actually stop the process, or try to stop the process, I should say. And so I'm a little bit concerned that we're adding complexity where we were trying to make something simpler.
So can I jump in? The intent in this process was not simplification. This is, while we want to simplify the overall process with the EDC, this is not part of that simplification.
Well, I'm all for the communication piece of this, getting more people involved, getting the word out and stuff like that. And if the Planning Commission plays a role in that, I think that's a good thing. But then to change the way approvals happen and make the Planning Commission have a say in whether or not this continues or it doesn't, I think I'm not sure that I understand it.
So this is modeled, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, after Roswell.
Yes, that's true.
And what it does is allows, it's designed to allow some more community input into to how an AG1 in our city AG1 development looks. ultimately, these are done by right. But there are opportunities for planning commission and community involvement to be able to maybe make something look a little bit better. An example would be, Kathy helped me, the development up by Tullamore. That was done where they were able to do the AG1 development by right, but they were about to wipe out a row of trees that along the roadside that would have affected the rural view shed.
The Grove.
Was it the Grove? The Grove.
Grove.
So yeah, without a doubt, they could have done that, and they could have knocked down that row of trees, but by right they could have, but there was a better way to do it. And of course, administratively, we caught that, and they worked with Mark Law, and they were able to come up with a better development. So what this will provide is that opportunity for a large contingency of our community, the Planning Commission, and the opportunity for public hearing for people to weigh in and possibly improve what the final product would be. I don't really envision a time that the Planning Commission would deny something, especially once it's passed the muster of.
So in this case, the Planning Commission's acting as proxy to the citizens that don't show up for some of these meetings, because my understanding is it's usually difficult to get any kind of real numbers to attend some of these communication type meetings.
It's new. The meetings we just did with the AG1 enhancements, those informational meetings, so it's fairly new. We've conducted a handful of them. I think we've got one more in the hopper. This will kind of more formalize that opportunity.
All right.
And I think it's something, and a couple folks want to speak, but, kind of trial and error, I hate to, but, the intent was to get some, just, have it available, citizens, the elected officials, everything, by right, G1, something gets developed, we drive by and see it happening the next day, and just like citizens were. And again, this just puts a little more effort in the process, but it allows people to get educated on it, so things won't be a surprise, and also to put some input in there.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor, what it also does is allows for the community input earlier in the process.
Right, to where they could make some tweaks.
Right.
You had a
So that kind of, like Steve said, it sort of formalizes the new public information meeting, but I also kind of look at this a little bit like an alcohol beverage license. If they've met the criteria, it's for the most part going to be approved. There could be some suggestions that may or may not, get done, but if they've met the law, that it's going to be approved, correct?
Council members, I'm going to respond to that very quickly, and I will say at the outset that I think staff has brought you exactly what was discussed, and my office has looked at this. But on the preliminary plat particularly, I want to read to you very quickly what it says in the actual code, because this is the one the Planning Commission is going to look at. And so again, what it says is the Planning Commission shall review the preliminary plat at its next meeting and shall approve the plat unless the plat is inconsistent with any specified adopted plans or policies or is inconsistent with the public health, safety, and welfare. Well, with respect to being inconsistent with other plans, I mean, the challenge I have from the legal aspect is by the time it's gotten to that point, staff will have already reviewed it for consistency with almost all of the specifications and standards. And even the situation that the city manager articulated was a negotiation, not a declaration by fiat. And I think that's worth noting. Secondly, the ability to deny because something is inconsistent with the public health, safety, and welfare. Your codes are the best manifestation of what is consistent with the public health, safety, and welfare. And if they have met those codes, I hope you're following the angle I'm pursuing. I'm just suggesting to you, while I think you've gotten exactly what we asked for, it can present some challenges when you test an entity with the discretion to deny, when what we really mean is we want to work to make something better. Because if it's a denial, I'm not sure what it'd be a denial for.
So Ken, but what you're saying is that by the time it gets to the Planning Commission meeting, whatever we call that, the staff would have reviewed it. We would have figured out that the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed in terms of compliance with our codes.
That is consistent with not only the preliminary plat process, but even the final plat process. I mean, this is the very discussion we had not in this room, but in a city, a Milton council meeting about the last plat.
Right.
is that your professional staff, the folks that really know how to get into the weeds of these, have already reviewed these. And so it does make it a challenge by the time that we're looking at these things, what are we looking for? And I like the way this manager articulated it. We're looking to make perhaps a product that may be technically accurate. We're looking to make it better, which makes a whole lot of sense to me, but sometimes capturing that in a written format can be a little bit of a challenge. So I'm just, on this one particularly, I'm struggling with giving a planning commission a denial when what we mean is transparency. To me, that's one of the huge parts of the transparency, public input, public participation, and possibly a better product, but probably at the other end of a negotiation and not a denial.
Could you call it cursory? I know sometimes they'll have cursory reviews versus a denial, but, or some similar term.
I think they'll probably labor over it, but I think exactly what sort of anticipated is, because obviously it's not final plat yet, it's going to be a work in progress, but that final plat can still tell a lot. I mean, you can tell a lot from that final preliminary plat, forgive me.
Karen, and then Matt?
Planning Commission currently doesn't make decisions, it makes recommendations. In this case, would it actually be making a decision, or would it be making a recommendation to us who eventually make the decision? If they recommend denial, does it ever come back before us?
It would not be a recommendation. This anticipates the denial with an appeal to you.
Because, I mean, that sounds like it's adding, if they deny something and has approved it, I don't know that that's fair. I mean, as much as I'm for getting much public input as we can possibly have, I don't know that it's fair to a developer if staff has approved a plan that has met stuff, if Planning Commission decided to deny it, for them to have to go through a whole nother step before it's brought to us and actually appeal it to us and actually take out more time, or as they have been known to do in the past, if they just defer it won't come to us. I mean, I guess I'm just a little confused why now, when everything else that they do is make recommendations to us, now suddenly they're making firm decisions that are only appealable to us.
This, again, was a change in response to some of the concerns that we had heard, probably rounding out last year, regarding appeared to be lack of community input on the regular G1 subdivisions that weren't the subject of a rezoning or a variance. Under the enhancements, we brought in that informational meeting, but it's very informal, and we only capture what information we may gather or capture. Having the Planning Commission weigh in was to be able to more formalize that. Obviously, you'll have to determine whether or not you truly want them to have approval or denial in that. But from what we can tell, it's working as a model in our sister city. Doesn't mean that's what's right for Milton.
Let me ask a question and then finish Karen and Matt. Could it be tweaked to where rather than an approval or denial, it's a recommendation, and basically almost, and the Planning Commission is probably the right board to do it, and you have to go over with them to make sure they're on board to do it. But hey, your role here, you're compiling, you're communicating with the citizens and the developer, and working together to hopefully tweak something or make it better. And then they bring a recommendation. Maybe it comes back to staff, and then in a very rare circumstance would it come back to it has to come to council for if it got denied, so to speak, or they had to have
The council's got to approve it regardless, the final plat anyway. So I'm not sure why they are why they are making a decision that we've got to make a decision on after they make a decision.
I don't know what the council thinks. I mean, I think it would lend itself more to getting an approve or a recommendation from the Planning Commission.
That's what I was thinking. That's how we do everything else. Is they make a recommendation to us, and they spend a lot of time discussing their recommendation, and we always spend a lot of time trying to understand where they've come from and really respect their recommendations. But I have a hard time understanding why this is different, and now they're making approval rather than making a recommendation when it's going to come before us for a final plat anyway.
Because the way we envisioned this was because this is much earlier in the process that would come to you. So we'd be able to interject changes earlier on. as opposed when it gets to you. So by the time it gets to you, you're right. The road is in, all the land's been disturbed. They would actually be weighing in before 1 grain of earth has been moved.
And I think that's great, but it's still, I don't understand why they're making a decision, and we got to make a decision on the same thing after they've already made a decision. Because really what they're really doing is they're doing the legwork for us, which they quite often do all the legwork for us, and they're making suggested changes to make the plan better. But the ultimate final decision we have to make as a council. So to me, they're really not making a final decision, because we have to make the final decision after they made a final decision. So,
Well, the way this is structured right now is the only way you would look at a preliminary plat is if there is a denial followed by an appeal. So that's the way it's drafted right now. I'm just food for thought. I mean, there could be variations on this thing. You know, again, for me, at least the way I envision this, the purpose of this going to the Planning Commission is more for a forum for public input.
Exactly.
It's the forum that's the key, not we approve or deny it. It's the forum. Why, for instance, if we're just throwing around options, could the Planning Commission recommendation not be a recommendation that goes back to staff? Because that's the individuals that are actually going to review the tendered final plat that will then come to you, and those recommendations could either be blended into that final plat process or not. But to me, I just think staff, with respect to the platting process, is so critically important, and even more so, if I may, and very respectfully, even more than the governing authority of the entire jurisdiction, because platting is so technically based.
Matt, did you?
Yeah, I could see good and bad in this, and I think we're trying to decide 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. Obviously, more public input is brought in at the very beginning. I could see that in the process. I think that's a very positive thing. You know, the question of the council that we have to decide is whether we want to divest some of this process to the Planning Commission, where they are making an approval or denial on that. If I understand correctly, if they make an approval, that process does speed up things on behalf of our landowners or developers in order to get something that's a good project done with that public approval. Am I stating that correctly? And in a positive, it seems like that's what it is. Is that?
I've got to believe there might.
Right.
I don't know, candidly. I don't know if you feel it would speed things up or not. I mean,
I don't,
Well,
yeah. I
just
mean,
make things more efficient is what I'm talking about, not speeding
right,
it up.
and it gives more guidance to the developer.
Right, right. The question that we have becomes whether or not a denial might be a political event or not. We would hope not. I think that's the elephant in the room here as we're talking about this, is the question of whether there would be just an outright denial just because they are a landowner who wants to develop or subdivide. And that's the question that we don't know the answer to. Could we put language in here that says that they can't debate based on that? Maybe, but they still would be able to vote one way or another on that process. I hope that they wouldn't. But that's just the question of whether or not that would happen. I think that would be very rare. I think we have good volunteers that would, if they made a denial, they would probably try to work with someone in front of them to come up with something that would make sense. But, you know, AG1 is, we're dealing with semantics like you were talking about with the tree issue. You know, AG1 is so inflexible as far as where you place any homes. We're dealing with, you know, the rural viewshed, and what else can you do legally on that end? So from the legal perspective, I think that the damage might be minimal here. I can see the efficiencies with staff. I am a little bit hesitant with regards to, you know, what would happen if a planning commission makes an approval or denial, because, you know, we're accountable to our constituents up here. But I think that we, you know, looking at both sides, I can see both sides in this. So,
Bill?
Question for you first is, without going back to your flow diagram, is this joint or this meeting with the Planning Commission going to replace the previous CIM in the past, or is this going to be a combined CIM Planning Commission forum?
Well, the CCIM is a forum we use for rezonings. So we would not have, and Robin could probably explain it more than I.
What it is now currently for AG1 subdivision it's just, we just call it an informational meeting. It's not a CZIM, it's just, I call it, or basically once a plat comes in, I talk to the developer, figure out a good time for him, and then I schedule it. So it could be on weekday and whatever.
Right,
So it's not the CZIM, but this proposal would replace that meeting, so it would just, a developer would submit their plat, their preliminary plat, would get it to where it needs to be. It would be on the planning commission, they would review it and make their recommendation or deny, approve, or whatever you all decide. And then it would go on to, they would start their formal engineering of the LDP after that.
Okay, you answered my question on that in
And
particular.
all the notifications would take place at this planning commission meeting.
Right. So I guess I don't understand the necessity of having it go to the planning commission. Where's the enhanced process, or how is the process enhanced by this? I guess you're looking for more community input on it. Do you really believe that this process here is going to enhance that process?
Well, our thoughts were that with this community information meeting as we currently have, it really is just an informational meeting where we will have the developer there and he will explain what he's proposing to do, and we will take questions. The planning commission public meeting, it will be a public hearing in that they will hear testimony from the developer as well as from the public. And they will then ask questions, and it will be a more formal type of hearing where the public will actually have the opportunity to weigh in as they do before this body, before the decision is made. We do not do that at the public information meeting. It's just truly what it is. It's just an informational meeting. So I see them as being a little different.
This is taking it another step.
Yes.
As far as, actually what the planning commission is kind of representing the citizens.
Well, it is adding another step, and I have an issue with that from an applicant standpoint, too. Suppose he submitted something after the planning commission meeting, so it's going to be another full month till the next one comes up. That's one point. The second point is the one that Mr. Reese brought up, is the fact that these plans are prepared by professionals, and they're reviewed by professionals from the Community Development Department. Then to put them, I can see it going in front of a community information meeting, but I'm not sure what the Planning Commission can add to it. Typically, you don't have 7 professionals that are involved in the planning process. And I would hesitate to give them any right of denial in a process like that. Recommendation, sure, and maybe to enhance the community input process so it's more transparent, certainly. But I don't think they're entitled to the right of referral or denial in a case like this, where they're dealing with professional preparers and professional reviewers. And to put it maybe more plainly, I'll go to 3 or 4 cardiologists to an opinion of what needs to be done, but I'm not going to go down the corner and talk to my cousin Mike and ask him if I should go in and have a triple bypass or not. You leave it to the professionals.
Okay, Rick?
Yeah, I guess, Kathy, in listening to what other council members have said, I think it may make sense if you're trying to enhance the process to get more information out there. You had an information meeting, maybe this more formalizes it to review and then get recommendation. But I guess I'm not in favor of having the planning commission do a denial or approval. I think it makes sense. You want to gather public input, if that's what this started out as, kind of enhancement of the information meeting, formalizing it more, I'm okay with that. As far as coming away with a recommendation and then they have to appeal if they it, then it has to come before us as an appeal. To me, that seems like we're adding complexity when it give recommendations with public input, come back to community development before you come forward to us with a final plat recommendation.
And, you know, I see this, and again, the original intent, I believe we started talking about it, was so that there would be more public information, everybody would be abreast and communicate, you know, rather than just a community meeting where you've got developer or lawyer presenting it and the public listening. This does add one step, but it gives, you know, if the planning commission could be the conduit to debate it back and forth. But again, what I'm hearing from council, I believe, is I don't think it should be an absolute denial or approval, but maybe can cull all the information from the public and get some opinion and give that to staff, who has to make sure that that plan already, you know, meets all the criteria. But, you know, they may have some ideas from the public or from the commission that you say, oh, yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. Move these trees around, or we do this, or some buffers here or there. You know, I could see it being a positive, overall a positive process, but I think what I'm hearing mainly is the heartburn over it being a, you know, an approval or a denial by the commission. Does that make sense? Is everybody here on board with, you know, having a public type meeting like this so that there is more communication, but more on the as a consideration?
I just think the approval could be really good on that end. A denial can cause a lot of really bad problems, though. It kind of creates a big gap there, and that's my concern.
Well, that's why I was saying, you know, instead of an approval or denial, it's a recommendation.
Right.
And, you know, actually, you know, staff would have to weigh the recommendations from, is this pie in the sky, or is it something that, you know, legally and zoning wise conform? So, Bill?
Just one last point. Sarah gets up periodically and talks about economic development. I just don't want this to be viewed as totally anti-development, or putting another hurdle in the way of developing here in Milton. We have pretty good control of how property is developed out here through our different ordinances, the tree ordinance, and of course our zoning ordinance and everything that goes along with it. But I have heard in the past, when we got started up here, for the first 5 or 6 years, that it was really difficult to get building permits or land disturbance permits in the city. And I think we've come a long way in the last 10 years. And I'd hate to see us turn around and head back in that same direction. I think there are a lot of enhancements to our process, certainly. We have a good community development staff here. They know what they're doing. You're obviously accepting professional plans out there from licensed professionals in the state, and I think you've got a good handle on it. I just wouldn't want to go from an objective situation to a subjective situation here in accepting and approving plans.
Mayor, can I jump in real quick? I just want to make sure. I think it sounds like we're getting some pretty uniform direction on this. Do you see any pitfalls with the Planning Commission coming back with recommendations to staff as opposed to what was originally being proposed?
My only thought on that is that it then becomes subjective in terms of the staff having to make that determination as to what's a good recommendation or a bad one, and as opposed to having it done with the Planning Commission, then it's very clear. But so I mean, that'd be the concern, is that we would have to get back involved in terms of looking at recommendations.
But the reality at that point, you know, we'd have some public input, we'd have the commission's input, but also then you have the professional engineers and professional staff. To me, I think that's a little bit closer working together than if we had, you know, the planning commission do one thing and then, you know, be totally different.
Well, I mean, we can work it out, you know. I think that that's a concern we just have to.
And that's also when we would have to cross the legal threshold of what must be done versus what is proposed to be done. And that would be a question I would have to help staff answer.
Rick and Burton and Karen.
See, I think it makes a little bit more sense, again, if we go back to why did we even consider this? Before we didn't have the process of a community information meeting, the only time you had the CZIM was if it was a zoning change. People didn't know about AG1 subdivisions. So we put a meeting process. To me, I don't think I want to add a whole approval process, denial process, appeal process where we didn't have that. I think we've complicated the process. I understand what we're trying to accomplish, but I think what I'm hearing and what makes more sense to me is if you want to formalize this, shift that meeting into this format, but then you're hearing from the public, you're also hearing from Planning Commission, then you guys do what you would have done anyway, but now you have more input than what you had in the past. Now you can take that and call it, because you had to do that anyway after the community meeting. Me, I think that makes more sense. I just don't like the idea of adding another step in the process, another formalization step of denial, approval, whereas we never had that before. Now we can gather more information, just use it for information, come up with a better product, if that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Bert?
I just think that I would like to see this replace the informational meeting.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a legal way that a planning commission, even if they wanted to deny something, if it's an objective checklist and all the boxes are checked, they can't check it. I mean, they can't deny it. Just like we do when we have some rezonings, you know, the professionals come in with their plans, we talk about it. Some things they can say, yeah, we could do that. Yeah, you know, we might, some of that stuff may come out of this. So that's what I'd like to see. That would make it clean. It does add a little bit more to the applicants, but it's not a whole additional step. But I think it helps help the community in the long run.
All right, Karen?
Yeah, I see Planning Commission not ever denying anything, because if y'all have already approved it, I don't know what grounds they would really have to deny it. But they could approve it conditioned and conditions that they would like to see, and like you to work with, as professionals, work with the applicant on. And then when it comes to us for final approval, I mean, we have a hard time with denying a plat that if it meets all the qualifications, it would be the same way. I see this as just an additional time for the community to give feedback on the subdivision that's coming in. Maybe members of the community may know more than the developer about the piece of property, so they may understand that there are some constraints that the developer may not even know. It's a time to get all that out, open, get more information out to the community, and, you know, hope not slow down the process for a good development.
You know, and again, I think I'm hearing, as I said a few minutes ago, the concept, I believe the council is pretty much on board with, but maybe going more in an advisory position with the Planning Commission. You know, I believe this will not only help the transparency, the awareness, the public can be involved, so at least some of these developments aren't a surprise. People can learn and study up, you know, and know what to expect. There won't be any surprises. But also, you know, there's room for improvement, and, you know, it's interesting. You know, we have in the past got complaints that it's hard to develop here or whatever, but I think it's coming full circle. Just this week I got a large property owner that is selling some large lots and said, you know, and this was a landowner and citizen that was always complaining about everything, and then said, gosh, I sure am glad you guys have been strict, because I'm getting more money from my big lots now than I would have. So, you know, I think it's kind of come full circle. You can use this as a positive thing to enhance some developments, you know, not trying to take anybody's rights away, landowners, but to enhance it. You know, I can't see where there's a big fall on this. So is the council okay with that, looking at it? Yeah. Same process, but more of that replaces a community meeting, and also the recommendation from the Planning Commission, and staff works with that. Is that, Ken, is that?
Yes, sir, I understand.
All right, so if you maybe work towards that, and then again, there'll be more discussion, and, you know, when it comes. Okay, you might stay up there, Kathy.
Actually makes the next agenda item probably moot.
Right.
All right, do we have any public comment on the next agenda item?
We do have two, sir.
Okay.
First comes from Scott Reese.
Okay. Okay. Okay, no more public comment then?
And next comment is Richard Warnick.
Kathy?
Okay, this text amendment pertains to giving duties to the Planning Commission to approve or deny. And so that this is what this would do. And so.
Okay. All right, Sudi, is there any questions or comments on this one?
Or have we decided we don't really need to
Right,
make
so
this?
basically, we would withdraw it.
Yeah,
When it-
right.
So when it comes before you, it would be
Council
sound,
okay with
and then you would withdraw that, so
Okay.
that would go away.
Yeah.
All right. Sudi, any public comment on the next item?
No, all the public comment we did, but they're gone.
Okay, will you read the item? just for the
Next
record?
one is discussion of RZ 1703 to amend section 64418, pre-development notification and public informational meeting, and section 64-419, definitions of AG1 agricultural zoning district. Ms. Field.
Mr. Mayor, I'd talk about the one that was just read, RZ 17-03, as well as 17-04, 17-05, and 17-06.
Can, procedure-wise, do we need to call each of these items, or can we?
Mr. Mayor, that's a perfectly appropriate way of addressing them all. As long as our clerk take minutes, we're good.
Okay.
In essence, what these do is they delete from each of these specific zoning districts, which are the AG1, the R1, the R2, and the R2A, deletes Plan A, which is the notification process using community information meeting.
Does it replace it with Plan B?
Well, that, you have to vote on that. That's why we talked about that first. I would expect next week that
Well, yeah.
you
Before Thursday, if we
It's
make that
replaced.
decision.
So we're taking it out of each of the zoning districts, but it would be replaced under the subdivision regs, so we don't have to repeat it over and over again, so.
Any questions on this? Okay. All right, Sudi, do we have any more public comment?
You do not,
You
sir.
want to call the next item, which, let's
10.
see, would be
Number 10.
number 10 on our agenda.
1707.
Seven.
Discussion of RZ 1707 to amend section 642453, creation of a historic preservation commission to allow compensation for meetings. Ms. Kathy Field.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This allows essentially the Historic Preservation Commission to be reimbursed for the actual and necessary expenses and may be compensated in the amount of $50 for each meeting. This is consistent with the compensation that has been previously voted for other boards and commissions. This was not included at that time, but is being proposed tonight.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right, Bert?
Do we even recognize a HPC at this point? I mean, we haven't. I don't.
Well, it is on the books. It's not working, but it is on the books.
I mean, do we have any, I guess we're just trying to be ready for when we do have
We
one
are.
at some point in time.
So part of our last strategic planning process, we were instructed to start exploring the resurrection of that group. In preparation for that, we're including it now.
Okay. And just curiosity, and I don't know if you know this or not, but we've already started paying the planning commission?
I would say, I think the finance department and HR just gave staff the packet of the plethora of
So we
forms to
don't-
do.
nobody
They
sent
haven't
me or
actually been
that
paid
sort of
yet.
stuff.
We also have an option. I've heard from some commissioners that do not want to be paid.
Yes.
And so they have that option as well, not to be
So we
paid.
don't have any date on that, but it's
No, not
it's
yet.
forthcoming, I
If
guess.
they're paid, are they
Hold
paid
on.
as employees or as contract workers?
They're employees, I believe.
We'll be taking taxes out on it.
Bill?
Out of $50?
Bill?
Is this going to be retroactive to when we pass this?
It will.
I have a question on that, and I'm sure Councilmember Thurman's thinking, but because that is the reality, you know, $50, it's not, I mean, I think the reason we enacted it, we wanted, it's a token, it's, you know, thank you for your service and all that, maybe you can get a dinner or something, but do you have to do it full, you know, as an employee, or is this something that can be done as a 1099 or something like that?
We looked into it, and we've spoken with the attorney's office, and we also asked other jurisdictions who were also paying their commissions or any of their boards, and they've all been recommended. And we also talked with the payroll company that has the software using. They all recommended that we would pay them as employees.
It just doesn't pass the independent contractor test. I mean,
Agreed.
it sounds
Okay.
ridiculous
Yeah.
that we're doing this.
but
I
you're
told
telling
them,
them
try
where
any
the
way you
meetings are when
can
you
to
show
make
up,
that
yeah.
happen, but
This is
Okay.
not the only jurisdiction that has not seen much utility in doing that, but that's the way the law is.
Yeah, and I apologize for, you know, digging into that, but Bert, go
Well,
ahead.
I'll go dig in it a little further. I mean, we couldn't just give them a $250 or $500 gift card at the end of the year. I mean, is that illegal?
That would still be taxable to them.
Okay. That's
Yeah, but it's,
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
well, you can give a gift card without having to take taxes out on it as the employer, not the employee. The
Not if
employee
it's
would have
not if it's above about $25. You're actually supposed to gross it up and give a person a,
You know what,
That's
again, I think we all have our, you know, the reality of what
Ridiculous.
the common sense would be, but you guys have checked other jurisdictions, legal and all that, so I say we just.
jury duty
Let it
finds a
go.
way around it by saying it's a $25 per day reimbursement for your expenses associated with going to jury duty. That's how they get away with
Is there a
it.
way to do that on a meeting, Ken? Do you know?
I believe. Mr. Mayor, I'd be very uncomfortable recommending we not handle it the way every other jurisdiction in Georgia does.
Okay, Bill?
Karen brought up a term, too. Is there any way we could gross up this $50 so they net 50 after taxes?
Yes, and you could always pay more. In fact, you know, the fact that you have to take out taxes obviously anticipates that small amounts don't make a whole lot of sense. But then you've got a bigger issue is, do you want to do that for every committee,
Maybe we-
commission?
And everybody's going to be different.
No, because if you gross it up, there's not going to be any federal withholding tax or state withholding tax for that amount. All you're going to be grossing it up for is, if you don't pay, would be FICA or and Medicare.
I think that, Sam had mentioned also into our retirement, there's a tiny bit taken out as well.
They would not qualify for the retirement, do
I
they?
It would be the defined
$100,000
contribution.
Take it out.
Because we are a Social Security replacement plan,
Oh.
it would be the defined contribution, then the
I mean,
401.
all right, this may be something, we may want to address it down the road, too, to see how it's working out. It may be more trouble than it's worth to some of the folks, but,
No, we wanted to just hand 50s out after the meeting, and we were advised against that, too.
all right,
Fulton County just used to contribute as a.
all right.
Yep.
Thank you,
They
Kathy.
got away with it.
All right, Sudi, if you will please call the next, I think, final line.
Final item is discussion of the final comprehensive service delivery strategy with Fulton County and all municipalities. Mr. Kenjard.
Council members, thank you. I know that you have heard and been updated about this in sort of bits and bursts throughout the years. Remarkably, I will confess to you that the actual negotiation with respect to SDS began around 2012. You know, one of the triggers is typically the decennial census. So there'll be another decennial census in 2020, and we'll start this whole process over again in 2022. But right now we have in front of you, well, I have in front of you, you will, for your council meeting, you'll have the final service delivery strategy. Now, what you have, I think what Sudi put in your books is probably just the top sheets, and that's literally the top sheets are the Form DCA documents that define each service, who provides it where, and how it's funded.
I actually put in all 1,035 pages on the iPads, so they got it all.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So you got,
You
let's
got it
hear
all.
it for electronic media. So you've got all of it. So
How many of us
behind,
have read all 1,000 pages? Yeah.
behind those top sheets are every intergovernmental agreement memorializing the strategy. And of course, this has taken, as you know, this has taken an extraordinary amount of time, and almost to the point that it almost begs the point of the wisdom behind it. Of course, the service delivery strategy is intended to incentivize governments to make sure there's no redundancy of service and double taxation for your citizens. Get that paying twice for the same service. So there's a very laudable public policy objective. I regret that it's taken so long, but you put 17 sets of attorneys in a room with 17 mayors and 17 chairmen of the board or whatever, and you get a lot of unfortunately less than productive meetings sometimes. And there's candidly some thorny issues to work out, particularly with respect to roadway funding. But the bottom line is Milton has always taken the position that we wanted to ensure a couple of things. One of those, of course, was a very clear understanding of sewer, which we worked out years ago, and we know what the city's intergovernmental agreement with Fulton County is now. The city of Milton has the right to unilaterally modify our sewer boundary map at any time. We then send that to Fulton County. Fulton County has no obligation, but can choose to sewer any portion of Milton to which you have authorized them to sewer in advance. They don't have to, but they can. And of course, you have used that power extraordinarily sparingly thus far. I will tell you of all the documents that you're going to look at, there was, and the chief or the city manager and the assistant city manager, Ms. Inglis, and I sat down one evening and went through every one of the forms and just did a quick blow by, just, here's just an update, here's the service, here's how it's funded, here's who's provided it. We found that the delivery that has been worked on pretty much was spot on. There were just one or two sort of maybe some concerns we had, but they were fairly modest. There was one that was not spot on accurate, but it was actually with the provision of jail services. The provided documentation suggested that the city of Milton unilaterally took care of and funded its own jail. Well, we don't. We have a fairly old memorandum of understanding between the Milton Department of Public Safety and the Fulton County Sheriff that controls the use of the North Fulton Jail Annex, where basically we get a couple of slots for free, and over a certain number we have to start paying, I think, a per inmate fee. And that's sort of controlling in Milton for a long time. I talked to Fulton County about whether we wanted to slide that in. Folks, at this point, it's not exactly correct. I'm telling you, I'm comfortable with adopting the version of the SDS that is going to be in front of you at the next meeting without making that change. There's law that suggests the sheriffs are not even subject to SDS, and so I think that our agreement with a sheriff is sort of an off-the-books agreement, if you will, anyway. This is an SDS, so I'm comfortable with us moving forward. I think that with respect to Milton, the SDS document is 98% accurate, and I'm comfortable with that. So bottom line, all of the cities now going back to their various councils, they're intending to ratify it. Well, then, as each one is ratified, we send them down to Fulton County. Fulton County will bundle them up and send them to DA, and we will be done.
Okay. Any questions, Bill?
5 years.
You mentioned the sheriff, and essentially the sheriff, in addition to managing the jail, is a process servant. So what is still being charged for the sheriff's services?
I don't know what our relationship is with respect to the Fulton Sheriff for the service of process, but I will tell you that service of process and those sorts of innately court duties like service of process are not covered in the SDS at all. And that's a statutory duty of the sheriff of the jurisdiction anyway, so it wouldn't really matter if we covered SDS anyway, because the sheriff has a jurisdictional-wide obligation to provide that service. So it doesn't really matter.
Okay, anybody else?
Thank you for your patience with this. It's been a long process.
All right, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thanks.